So we'll start out with just a quick definition of what a community land trust is. So at its core, it is an alternative way of owning land and buildings. And within this model, land is treated as a common heritage and not as an individual possession. And it's removed from the market and it's owned by a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which collects a lease fee for the benefit of the larger community. Within this model, the structural improvements, including buildings or other kinds of infrastructure, are owned separately from the land, usually by the people living on the land. And then there's a ground lease, which gives the owners of the improvements the exclusive use of the land beneath their buildings. And a key thing about community land trusts is their method of governance. It's a form of collective land ownership that has a very specific type of governance. It's a membership-based nonprofit organization which operates within a defined geographic area. And the board is structured so that it includes both leaseholders who live on the land, as well as people who live off the land in the local community. And this mix on the board provides a balance of public and private interests, because those who live on the land may have a certain perspective on it, certain interests related to living on the land, while those who live off the land would have a broader perspective looking at the broader good, public good. And so that's a unique thing about community land trusts. How do they differ from other types of land trusts? Well, the type of land trust that is possibly the most common one are conservation land trusts. And those are a type of land trust that focus specifically on protecting the ecological or agricultural value of land. And they typically do that by acquiring easements that restrict land use. And sometimes, though, they may actually have a fee simple ownership of land. But most of the time, the land in a conservation trust has a different fee simple owner, and the land trust just has an easement. Another type of land trust you may have heard of is a private land trust. You may have heard of intentional communities that say that they are land trusts or they have a land trust, but the land is owned by the community, and the board members all live on the land. And so that would not be a community land trust because there's no representatives that don't live on the land. So we refer to that as a private land trust, and they're essentially collective owners, but also they'd be considered private landowners as well. And then there's also a legal term of land trust, which is a type of land trust that's created for investment purposes. So before we go into the nuts and bolts of this, we want to talk about the broader context of land ownership in North America. So historically, the indigenous peoples of North America practiced collective territorial use of land. And there's a really cool website called nativeland.ca that shows the tribal territories, and you can type in an address and find out whose territory that is at that address. But the Native American people had a very different view of land ownership than the Europeans who later came here. And to represent that, I have a quote from a Native American who says here, "Our land is more valuable than your money. It will last forever. It will not even perish by the flames of fire. As long as the sun shines and the waters flow, this land will be here to give life to men and animals. We cannot sell the lives of men and animals. Therefore, we cannot sell this land. It was put here for us by the Great Spirit, and we cannot sell it because it does not belong to us." And this is a quote from Crowfoot, chief of the Blackfeet, circa 1885. So within their worldview, they felt that they could not own the land, and no one should own the land. However, the European invaders who came to North America basically stole the land through various means and imposed the European legal system of land ownership. And the focus of this legal system was on the economic value of the land and making profits from it. And eventually, here's a picture of manifest destiny. The Europeans, spread across North America and took most of the land and imposed this European paradigm. And within this European legal paradigm of land ownership, land can be privately owned. But something that we need to keep in mind, though, is that even within this paradigm, land ownership is a bundle of rights. So those that typically we think of the owner as the title owner of the land. And there's a lot of rights that that title owner has. For example, you'll see on the left here, the title owner has the right to use and occupy the land, they'll have the legal title to it, they have the right to subdivide the property, to lease it, to sell it, to mortgage it, they can create covenants that run with the land, they can speculate on the land, and they have the right to the mineral rights. But even within this legalistic paradigms, other parties do have some ownership rights. The public can make use of privately owned land. For example, to put railroads through or public works, electric power lines. There's also air rights and riparian water rights that may belong to the public. The government has some rights, for example, to collect property taxes or enforce a lien or protect endangered species or wetlands. The government can restrict land uses through zoning. The government can take over land by exercising its right to eminent domain, and it can also prevent noxious or nuisance uses. Also, third parties may have some rights. For example, a third party who leases the land may have the right to use and occupy it as a tenant. In some jurisdictions, there's a freedom to roam, that third parties may be allowed to roam on the land. Homeowners associations may have some rights, or historic preservation districts may have some rights. A conservation easement is a way to convey land rights to a third party. And there's also a concept known as adverse possession, whereupon someone who does not own the land but uses it for a certain period of time may acquire rights to the land. So we need to keep in mind that within this European paradigm, there's all these different rights.